talking about overcoming fear, and we overcome fear by having faith. Faith is trust, right? So number one, if you're taking notes, write this down. We need to trust that God is enough. Moses' response to God saying, Moses, I want to use you, is not one of jumping for joy, but is one that is met with a question. Verse 11, Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is also who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses is not jumping for joy, but Moses is wrestling with the reality of being called to something that he's afraid of. If you remember from last week, we talked about Exodus chapter 1 and 2, and it was the background story of Moses being raised. Moses was a Hebrew boy that, as they tried to save him, passed his little self down in a basket and was taken in by one of the daughters of Pharaoh. So this Hebrew boy was saved from slaughter and was raised in the royalty of Egypt, the most powerful nation on the world. But Moses, as he grew up in age, started to realize the oppression of his people. And as he tried to step into his calling, but without the power of God, ended up killing a man that was an Egyptian and ended up fleeing from Egypt because Pharaoh was out to get him. 40 years have gone by since that point. Moses has gotten married. He's had children. He's taken up a new occupation. He's now a shepherd. And he's simply living his life, being a shepherd, doing what shepherds do, taking care of sheep. And as he's living his life, God encounters Moses. And God says, hey, listen, Moses, this land that you left, I want to bring you back to that land, and I want to use you to set the people free. Isn't it funny how sometimes we can ask God to use us in powerful ways, and yet when God brings it to us in an unusual way, sometimes we cower in fear? Isn't it unusual that sometimes we pray that God, you would use me to change the world, but when God says, here's how I want to use you, we pull back in fear. Our fear holds us back from saying, yes, God, I'm ready. And I want to hone in on what Moses' fear is here, because this is really the undertone of a lot of this message. Moses responds to God and says, who am I that you would send me? Like, why are you choosing me? You can hear it in the way that he speaks it. Moses is pointing to the fear of inadequacy, unworthiness. God, there's got to be someone better, God. I mean, you're choosing me. I mean, I haven't been to Egypt in decades. I'm a fugitive. I'm a foreigner, God. I mean, you really want to choose me? The Israelites don't like me. The Egyptians don't like me. I haven't, I'm a shepherd. I'm simple, God. How are you bringing this into my life in this season? I have a family and kids. He's got all these reasons about why he's not the guy for the job, but really at the root of it, it's fear. I'm not enough, is what Moses is saying. And how often do we feel that same way? If God calls something and says, I want you to do this, I called you to this, I want you to make an impact in this area, sometimes, especially when it's bigger, and that's usually how God works, he brings something bigger into our life than we would expect at a time that we don't expect it, and our fear gets in the way from us stepping into our calling. We say the same thing, who am I? Who am I? I mean, I'm this, I'm that, but who am I? I'm not wired or gifted. My background, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not experienced, I'm not educated. And we give all these reasons why we're not that who. And it's interesting how God responds. If I was a parent and that was my child, I would tell my child, no, you are enough. You're smart, you're gifted, you were raised in a good home, we've educated you, I would try to build my son up and say, no, you are enough, but that's not what God says. And I want you to hear me clearly, because this is so important. God says, hey, listen, Moses, you're asking the wrong question. you're focused on the wrong thing. You're focused on you being enough when you should be focused on I am enough. Moses, you're focused on who am I instead of who is God. Moses, you're focused on your power instead of my power. You're focused on your position instead of my position. Moses, this is not about you. This is about me. And you, Moses, you are not enough. You're not enough. You don't have the gifting and ability and this and that. You aren't enough. But you know what, Moses? When you're with me, you are more than enough. Hey, Moses, if I sent you into Egypt alone, you wouldn't be able to do it, but you're not going alone, Moses. Hey, to talk to Pharaoh, you wouldn't have the right things to say, but you don't have to worry about it because you're not going alone, Moses. I am going with you. And this is the power of the reality of Christianity, is that Jesus left this earth so that he could send another. He sent the Spirit of God to live inside of us so that we are never alone. He will never forsake us or leave us. He says all the way back in Exodus, I'm never gonna call you to something that I'm not willing to go into that with you. It sounds big to you, but it's small in reality and comparison to me. Don't focus on who you are, focus on who I am.